Thanks for joining us again on our second episode of Being Love in Our Marriages. So, today we're going to talk about something that I think we probably all have a hard time with, and it's something that you really talk about in your new book, True Companions, which is compromise. You're going to teach us how to
Mm.
compromise, okay? So,
Okay.
that's what you're going to do today. Um,
Uh-huh.
okay, so one of the quotes that you say that I loved. You say compromise isn't changing who you are, it's
Mhm.
changing how you fit together. So
Mhm.
it's how to compromise well without
Mhm.
losing who you are. So I
Mm.
love that. So I want to know just kind of your definition of compromise in a marriage, if you can
Mm.
give that to me.
In a marriage. Um, it would be um, finding a way um, to do life um, according to your preferences and your partner's preferences with approximately equal frequency and gladness of heart.
Ooh,
Um, Yeah, because I think that we think compromise is like, I have to give up what I love and you have to give up what you love to do some sort of watered down version in between, in which both of us don't really get to show up as ourselves. And then we're both resentful, basically. I mean, there's no way not to not resent that. And
right.
so, yeah, to live life according to your preferences and your partner's preferences with approximately equal frequency and gladness of heart.
Okay, I liked the gladness of heart part. That was good.
Uh,
Okay, so when I think of compromise, I think not only just of like things to do, like one of the things
yeah.
you talked about in your book is just your personality. It's very different than,
Mhm.
your wife's personality. So you're more of an introvert. You like to stay in, she likes to go out. So basically, I'm your wife and Grant is you. Like, like
Yeah.
he
Okay.
starts to sweat a little bit when I'm like, aren't you excited to have a dinner party with 27 people? And he's like, he's passing out a little bit. So
I actually said to my wife last night, I go, "Can you just go slower and say it more quietly?" Like, I was just
that'll
so
make it
overwhelmed.
better. That'll make it better.
Yes. Like, I
Yes.
can I can tolerate that a little bit better. Yeah.
Yes. Like his words are done at like when he comes home from work. Yeah.
Right, there you go.
So we've had to compromise on that, which I think is a little bit, you understand like, hey, one night, and you guys do this too. In your book you talk about it like, okay, I'm not going to plan the entire weekend with people because I could do
Right.
that. That's so fun for me.
Yep.
So I'm going to honor
Mhm.
him and we're going to do something just as a family, or maybe he just needs to do something by himself and go,
Yep.
which I used to be
Mhm.
offended that he would want to do that because it wasn't with me. I'm a little
Yep.
over I'm over that. I'm working through that. Um so that part,
That's a great example of compromise that
okay.
I mean, you've like your literally heart has changed about
Well,
that.
it's getting
You've
there. It's getting there.
you went 20 years in, you got, hopefully another 30 or so to go. Yeah.
Yeah, it is getting there. So those are sometimes the easier maybe parts of compromise, like the things that we like. Like, okay,
Yep.
you like hiking,
Yep.
I don't. I feel like that's a little bit easier. The thing
Mhm.
that might be harder that I hear people and ourselves is the compromise of maybe bigger things. So, I guess my question is, when you have two personalities who are so very different and see the world
Yep.
even so different, um,
Yep.
and that's probably what attracted you to one another when you first got married.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
10, 15, 20 years down the road, those are the things that are like colliding.
Yes.
Help us with that. Does that give you
Well,
any
my first
indication of kind of the compromise? Like, how do we how do we
yes.
compromise in those things and on those things that are like driving us
Yes.
crazy?
Oh my goodness. I mean, first piece of help is totally normal. It's ordinary.
Yeah.
Don't feel, I mean, I suppose there's various reasons to feel like, oh, maybe I made a mistake in doing life with this person. That's not one of them.
Yeah.
Very common. We're naturally attracted to people who complement us, who sort of, it's that old Jerry Maguire line, who complete us
Right,
in a
right.
sense. We actually it's interesting. We are aware at some deep level that we actually need that.
Hmm.
And yet day in and day out over the course of years, it would be way easier to be in relationship with somebody who is exactly like us.
Mm-hmm.
It would simply be easier,
Yeah.
right? They would understand what you want, how you like to do things, your energy level, your style of living, and so that would be easy. The issue, of course, is that we start to create conflict and blame our partners for being who they are.
Mm.
We chose them, you
Yeah.
know. Oftentimes, it's not that they changed; it's that our day in and day out preference for how much to embrace who they are changed. And so again, we sort of have to take some responsibility for that and recognize that the goal for both of us is to make as much space in the relationship as we can for the other person to be completely who they are.
Mm.
And that ranges from activities we do to things we believe to just the overall pace of our life. I resonate with what you said because my wife and I, this isn't, yeah, our differences aren't just about like, should we hang out with friends on a Saturday night? They get all the way to the core of us that
Mm.
I could go retreat to a writing cabin right now and not come out till 2030 and be totally happy. And she likes change and adventure and
Yes.
excitement and people. And this sort of, at a neurological level, we are different.
Yeah.
And those differences create I want to say conflict in the best sense. Conflicts in terms of what we want to do, how we want to be, how we want to show up to life. I mean, all day, every day. And so we're having to figure out how to make space for both of us in our lives together.
How do you embrace those differences? Like feel like at the beginning of marriage, it wasn't they were awesome and they were cute and they
Yeah.
were like exciting and all those things. And then like how do you embrace
Yeah.
them later? When I think honestly we get probably lazy.
I've never told. Yeah. 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 I don't know if I've ever told anybody to put these two things together for people. I'll do it here. Why not? Um, our first spring break together, we were in graduate school. That's where we met. My wife said, "Hey, my brother is a chef right now down on St. John in the Virgin Islands, and yeah, we can really only afford plane tickets, but I'm sure we'll find some place to crash, in the Virgin Islands." So we flew to the Virgin Islands with no place to stay, and went around in the hills till we found an abandoned hut villa with electricity still and water still running, and we squatted for like a week. And I was so anxious about the whole thing. I had terrible cold sores in my mind. I mean, I was like having an immune system
Yes.
shock
Yes.
down, like and so I can make those compromises for a week. I can't do that for 3 consecutive vacations, maybe 2. But the next
Yes.
one we got to go to a beach I know and stick our feet in the sand and get our hamburgers from the same place every day, because that's how I kind of enjoy
Yeah.
time away from normal life. So I'm not sure what your question was, except to say that I don't know what your question was.
Well,
It
how
was
do we embrace that? Like how do you embrace
Yeah,
that without being
that's
anxious?
what
Yes, that was what
what
it was.
it was. Yes,
And not
thank you.
having
And the
cold
answer to
sores.
Right. Well, so number one, I get less cold sores these days because I've learned how to do it. She's expanded me. She's
Okay.
grown me,
Okay.
right? You will be most grown by somebody who's the opposite of you.
Okay.
Um, I I often tell folks the only good reason to get into a marriage is to grow, because in order to be together and to thrive in your marriage, you are going to have to grow. And so we need people who are very different than us to force us to grow. So I've learned how to do life better as a result of her. And this is probably the number one practical thing I'd recommend. Sit down someday and make a list of all the ways that you've grown, all the experiences you've loved that you've never had, all of the ways that you've been balanced out in healthy ways by the differences in your partner. Go
That's
out of
good.
your way to kind of create a sense of abundance and gratitude around who they are and how different they are is brought to your life. Then sit down and make a different list. And this is a list of all the ways it would be terrible if you were married to somebody exactly like you. I would not know anybody. I wouldn't have any children. I wouldn't have any children at all, because we both would agree, oh, that's going to be too stressful,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And I mean, these three wonderful creatures, I would not trade for anything in the world. We wouldn't have them. And there's so many things
Yeah.
that
That's good.
there's so many ways my life would be smaller,
Mhm.
And her life would be out of balance
Mhm.
if we didn't have the other one challenging us to grow and to compromise. So that's my encouragement to couples: is be really intentional about understanding if you weren't facing these challenges together about compromise. I don't there you, life would be cheapened, I
Mhm.
think.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. I like the writing down the things because I think sometimes the reason it's so hard is because you don't see the benefit of it. It just feels like something that doesn't come natural to you, or you don't see it the same
Mhm,
way that they do. Um,
mhm,
so let's talk about that. Let's talk about compromise and seeing things differently. So,
mhm,
because Grant and I are so different, we even see the world differently. So,
mhm,
we had a conversation the other day, and I really value like
mhm,
unlearning things, learning new things, constant change,
mhm,
constant growth. I'm a non traditionalist. Like, why do you have to do it that way? You've been doing that for this many years. Let's try something new. So,
mhm.
all those things, opposite those for Grant.
Yeah.
He loves tradition. He loves like the steadiness of things. He loves, like
Mhm.
it's not like he can't do those things, but where I am changing or growing, he's like, why? Like, that feels so, why are you doing that? And then where I see him maybe being more traditional or
Right.
seeing the world that way, I'm like, but why? But my way's better. So, how do you
Mm.
compromise where you're not constantly saying to the
Mhm.
other person, but if you only did it my way?
Yeah. 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 What's that old that's an old story about, a bunch of people can be like blindfolded, they're touching different parts of the elephant, none of them know they're as they try to explain it to each other. I feel like we're all touching different parts of the elephant, and if we put all those parts together, we can get a better sense of, like, life's an elephant, and we're all trying to get a better sense of what life is. But instead of kind of collaborating and communicating with each other about our different angles, our different
Mm,
experiences, our different perspectives, we get into a debate about who's right and
yeah.
who's wrong, right? And it just cuts it off at the knees. Like, I was actually listening to Matthew McConaughey's memoir
Hmm.
that just came out, Green Lights, and he tells a story about he's in an African cafe with two new acquaintances, African men, and they're debating something, and he waits for the first break in the conversation, and he says, "Well, I think you're right for this reason and that reason." And the man who he just agreed with looks at him and says, "It's not about right and wrong. It's about, do you understand?" Like, in our culture, in other words, we don't debate kind of right and
Mm,
wrong. Our
interesting.
conversations are entirely designed around, do we understand each other? Do I understand why you hold your perspective? Do I
Mm,
understand why I hold my perspective? And so if we could do that in marriage, in those moments where we begin to say, hey, the way I see this is right and the way you see it is wrong. And instead, like, because I don't see it your way, we need extra space here for me to understand it,
mm-hmm.
because I don't naturally understand it. So now our conversation is going to be about me understanding you better. Um, to me, that starts to pave the way for really joining together, to move to decisions about life and how you do life that are actually wiser than either one of you would make if you were the same person.
Do you feel like it's okay to like agree to disagree? Like do you like that phrase? Like, okay, I don't see it exactly how you do. I don't quite even understand how you see it, but I'm okay that you see it that way.
I mean, so this is sort of, I would encourage folks to be relentless about trying to understand.
Okay.
That if there's a goal for your relationship,
Hmm.
one that maybe is unattainable, is that you spend the next 30 years trying to understand why they see it that way.
And tell and
Um,
and tell me how to do that. How do I understand? What are some ways I can do that in a non-threatening, like I really I mean,
mm,
first obviously my heart has to be right and I have to be
mm,
surrendered to understanding even if I don't agree with it
yeah.
or those kind of things. But like, how do you do that? How do you like
Mm,
tangibly live like that?
yeah. Yeah. So, um, well, you're not going to understand anything on the fly. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
right, there's just, I mean, it really is about, we talked about this a little bit last week, creating spaces, carving out spaces for conversation, and making sure that when you set down the intent of those conversations, that the goal is a shared goal,
Mm-hmm.
that we're going to try not to convince the other person of our beliefs, perspectives, ideas, but we are going to actually, we're going to give all of our energy to understanding the other person's
That's good.
perspective, what it's like to be in their shoes,
Mm-hmm.
the story that led up to this point. It's amazing to me, still 20 years in, I'm still finding out new things about my wife's story
Yeah.
when I'm trying to understand why she sees a certain thing in a certain way. And she'll share something that I'm like, I didn't even know you worked that job. How did I not know that?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's important. I had a super clinical supervisor once. I complained to him that I was stuck in all my therapy with all my clients, and he just looked at me and he said, "Well, if you're stuck, it's because you don't have the same goals." And I went to every single one of my clients and I asked that I was feeling stuck with, and I said, "What's your goal for therapy right now?" And they told me, and in every case, it was different than my goal for therapy.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and I've taken that wisdom and I've applied it to every therapy I do and every relationship that I'm in. If I feel stuck in my marriage, I step back and go, or even in a conversation, what's your goal for this conversation? Um, well, my goal is I want you to end up wanting to do this with me. Okay.
Right.
My goal was to try to understand why you want to do that. And hopefully I wanted your goal to be to understand why I want. What if we could enter into those sorts of conversations with a
Mm,
mutually agreed upon goal that we're just trying to understand each other today, and
that's
we'll leave the
good.
decision making about how all this plays out for down the road. I think we'll actually discover that we get a lot farther than we think we will. And compromise won't feel like this resentful concession.
Mm-hmm.
It'll feel like this celebration. I understand you. I understand why this matters so much to you.
That's
Um,
good. And
may-
oh, sorry, you cut out a little bit after the part where you said, "I understand why this matters so much to you." What did you say after that?
um, I think I might have just. I think
Oh,
that
that
was
was
sort
it.
of where I
Okay.
ended. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. So okay, I love that. First of all, the understanding, because one of the things that we talk about is if you know the story and experiences of people,
Hmm.
that's probably why they view a certain something the way that they do. And we
Hmm.
just don't ask. Like even just in relationships with
Right,
friends or, you know, in the tension of like politics or whatever is something that people have tension
right.
about. You just automatically judge someone for having that thought or
Hmm.
having that opinion, and then your opinion's different. And we never get to the heart of why they have that opinion or why they
Right.
see the world that way. And the other thing is it might be different than they were 20 years ago because of experiences they've had. That's what we're kind of seeing is our experiences have changed. So our thoughts about things have changed. And it's like
Yep.
that, wait a second, 20 years ago, that's not how you thought. And now you do. What happened? And
What
that's
happened?
what happened.
That's an exciting conversation.
What
What happened?
happened?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that also is kind of the thing is like after you've been married for a while and you change and you grow, some things change the way that your opinions
Yeah.
are. And I think sometimes that's hard to embrace maybe. How do you do that?
Well, and I think it's important to acknowledge that we don't do that with everybody.
Hmm.
Like the, the vast majority of people that we come into contact with in our lives, we're probably only going to be in their life to the extent to which we have things in common,
Hmm.
right? We don't
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
compromise. We both
Right.
have kids in this sport.
Right.
We both love to play this activity. We like to play golf, or we
Yeah.
like to book club, and we all like share the same interests. I think the thing that is so unique and essential to true companionship is that you're saying in true companionship, this is a relationship in which we are committed to doing life together, even though we don't share everything in common. And
Hmm.
that's why compromise becomes so essential and so part and parcel of true companionship. Like I think of I think of my favorite vacation, which is we go to the same beach town here, and I think like there's this big strip, and like there's various shops on the strip, and to me, compromise is this like in true companion. Like we spend a lot of time in the bookstore because my wife and I both love books, right? So that's an easy one,
Yeah.
right? Like no compromise required there. Um, and then she wants to go into the Christmas shops. Do you know what I'm talking about? The Christmas shops. Do you know these
The
horrible
beachy ones.
places?
Yes, yes. I
The
love
beachy
them.
Christmas
They're so
shops. Oh
magical.
my God, they're so overwhelming. Like there is so much odor and sound and visual stimulation that I used to refuse to go into them. Right. And now I go into them until I'm about to have a panic attack. And then I go out and sit on the bench. And that's our compromise.
Do you have like a
That's what
flag that
compromise
you
is. It's
wave? You're like, okay, okay, okay.
God bless her. She can see it happening now, and that's the
She
compromise too,
sees
is
the glazed over look.
she's like, thank you for coming in here for 5.5 minutes. It means a lot to me. Why don't you
Yeah,
go hang out outside?
because you
Like that
tried.
sort of thing.
Because you just
Tried.
tried. You just tried. Yeah.
And I tried without like being grumpy about it. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to show up kind of because I want this to be a good experience for her because she loves these crazy stores.
That's
Um,
good.
and then I can't when I got nothing left. And sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's a little more. She says, okay, or I say, hey, I think I'm going to go outside now. She's like, yeah, absolutely. You made it a long time today. Good job. And then, two stores down, I'm obsessed about finding the right pair of sandals. It's hard to find a good, comfortable pair of sandals. So
It's
I have to
tough.
go to
It's
every
tough.
shoe store on the boardwalk to make sure I get just the right pair. And she's like, she's like, just buy a pair of sandals. Who cares, But she goes to every store with me as I do my shopping, or as many as she can handle until
Yes.
she's fed up. To me, that's like an image of compromise.
Mm-hmm.
The bookshop is easy. That's where we spend most of our time in relationships, is hanging out with people who
Yeah.
like the same places. But companionship is about going into the spaces with other people in life that, yeah, that you wouldn't choose to go into if it weren't for valuing them and your life together.
That's good. I love the gladness of heart that you said earlier. So you were doing those things, and if you're listening right now, you have the thing in your head. Like if you're married right now, you know the thing, whether it be as simple as that or like something that's bigger that you're having to, to compromise on. Maybe a decision about kids or, all whatever. They could be huge things, but gladness of heart. And then the other thing that I heard you say is that you are in that moment, you're about the other person. So it really wasn't
Yeah,
how you were feeling. You wanted your wife to have a great experience. And if that meant
that's right.
you felt whatever, you were okay with that. You kind
Right.
of held your hands open and was surrendered to that because you're like, my goal is to put that person before me. And I think honestly, that's probably like if we really thought about it, if our intention every day was to think, like if I thought every day, like, how can I make Grant's life just awesome today? Or what would
Yeah.
it be for me to give him a meaningful day or for it to be about him? Half the things that I'm worried about or care would literally just fall away if he was my
Yes.
main, if that was the main thing, you know?
That's right. That's right.
Oh,
I love that you picked up on that, um, and framed it the way that you did, because when I go into that Christmas shop, I don't I don't suddenly love Christmas shops,
right.
right? It's not that I cease to be me, it's that I put myself second for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
I just put her first for a little bit, and let her have her space to do her thing, to be herself, and eventually, I mean, I think in healthy companionship, again, there's the mutuality, and those I trust now that those roles will reverse, and I'll have my space for myself to be put first, and that's what we celebrate over time.
And think if both your goals every day, spouse's goals every day, was to
Mm.
put the other one first, to give them the meaningful experience, to make their lives better that day, what would it be like? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It would be
Now all of a sudden, yes, instead of having to fight for your own space, the other person's
yes.
fighting to give it to you. So you're both getting
Yes.
your space, but given to you, not taken from the other, right?
Mm,
That's the game changer.
that's
You
good.
said that so well.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that. But then, okay, but then also I'm gonna caveat that with I have to do that, but not expect that in return. I cannot put that on my spouse. Like if it really is unconditional love, I cannot say, well, I'm gonna do this, and in turn, he's gonna do this, and if he doesn't, then I'm mad about it because that's not true. It's like, you know, when I unloaded the dishwasher, so I expect him to blah blah blah. I expect. And then it's
One of
that
the more,
gain. Yeah.
yes, that's exactly right. One of the more destructive patterns in relationships is I'll make that effort
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll sort of watch and see if you
Mm,
reciprocate. And as soon as you don't, I'm so mad because you didn't give it back to me. And that's where this intentionality about the relationship isn't happening at the day-to-day level. It's happening at the global level where you've had this conversation and you've developed an understanding of what compromise is, and you both have committed to it, and you're having an ongoing conversation about compromise and how you both can be you in the relationship. And now you know you can trust you're in relationship with a partner who, well, maybe they didn't just immediately reciprocate. They're going to, though.
mm-hmm.
They know they have the same goal. We share
Yeah.
it, and that over time we'll find a way to work this out. And then if it feels like it's getting really imbalanced for a season, then you come to your partner and you say, this compromise thing, I feel like it's been out of balance. Do you? And if you
Mm,
do too, is there some way that we can get it back in balance right now? Um, here are the ways I've been wanting to show up to life that I feel like I haven't been able to do lately because your job's requiring this of you or your passions are requiring this of you. Is there a way for me to get back in here? And they go, oh my gosh, like that's one of the main goals of our relationship, and I wasn't paying attention to it. I habituated to you. Like, yes, let's figure out how to make sure this works for you for this next season, because you're referencing a larger goal that you've already agreed upon.
if you could just be like an earpiece in my ear to say that that way, because
Hmm.
that is truly the goal. And when it does
Mm.
feel out of balance, instead of saying what you just said,
Yeah.
I say, oh my gosh, have you not even noticed that I've been doing all of these different things? You know what I mean? Like that's what I don't say it that tough. I don't think I do. But I mean, in my head, that's what it sounds like. It's like, wait a second.
Mm.
Or either I resent or I say it. I'm more the one who says it. Grant probably is more the one who just keeps it
Yeah.
inside until one day it's just, who knows when that's going to happen. But I think I wish I could frame it in that way that you just said instead of the
Hmm.
way that we usually do, which is, have you not noticed what I've done and why have I been doing all of this? Why have I been carrying the load?
I mean, I don't I have a hard time saying it that way when I'm in the middle of my
Right.
relationship, right? That self-defensiveness, needing to advocate for yourself
Mm-hmm.
aggressively shows up. One of the things, one of the themes of True Companions and most of the writing that I do is that every outward journey needs to be preceded by an inward journey, right? So um, we need to create some space for ourselves to become aware of what we're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and then think about how not tiptoe around it, right? Actually be really assertive and
Mm-hmm.
straightforward, but to say it in the way that we'll wish we had said it, afterward. And a lot of times we do need a little bit of space to reflect upon that ourselves so we
Mm-hmm.
can choose how we show up. So yeah, don't expect yourself to get it right in the moment.
Yeah.
Expect yourself to get it right in a little bit of quiet space you have to think through it, and then see how well you can execute on
Yeah.
sharing it in that way, because it's not going to be easy.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. I like that. As we kind of wrap up this one, I want to just give you kind of my takeaways I've been writing while you've been talking.
Mm,
And then any takeaways that you would like the listener to kind of come
mm,
away with when it comes to compromise. The
mm,
first
mhm,
thing is that, my goal should be understanding. Like, I
mm,
love that you said that, like, if that's your goal for the next 30 years, and that's your goal.
mhm,
And I think for me, I want it now. I'm a now
mhm,
person. And so I'm like, well, if I don't understand it in 30 minutes, I'm probably never going to understand it. But
mhm.
I think that's the bad way to see it. I don't think that's the
Right.
right way to see it.
Mm,
That it takes time. And then I think the second thing is to really pursue um, Grant and his wants
mm,
and needs first, and to think of that
mm,
maybe even just in the everyday. How can I better his life? How can I make him have just the most
mm.
meaningful day today, or to feel loved today? Not because I want him to do it back, but because I genuinely love him and I want to put
Yes.
him first. So those are the two
Yep.
takeaways that I have that I'm going to work
Mm,
on
love it.
this week, is understanding and that listener, kind of what we talked about last week, is the
Hmm.
speaking and the listening. That's huge.
Yeah.
So if listeners haven't
Yep.
listened to that, go back and listen to our first episode, and then putting him first, and just having that in my brain. What else would you want listeners to take away today on compromise?
Um, I think that's a great question. For what popped into my head is that there's this term that originated in the research literature around marriage, which is it's sort of sounds sort of researchy. It's empathic joining around the problem,
Okay.
and
You got to
the
explain that
idea,
to me.
yeah, yeah, the idea is that we normally in marriage we start to think of the other person as the problem.
Hmm.
Um, but if together we can seek to understand each other and empathize with the other person's position, and then see the problem as a third entity outside of us, right? So you're not the problem and I'm not the problem. The problem is that our kid is waking up 10 times a night and we're exhausted. So how do we join together, empathically understanding how it's hitting each of us to work on that problem and solve that problem together. And I think compromise is sort of like that. That's the third entity. It's not that you're the problem because you're different from me, or I'm the problem because I'm different from you. It's that compromising companionship is its own challenge and its own reward. And so how can we try to understand each other better and work together to solve the problem of compromise, which is a lifelong task that we're going to be working on together. And if you do that, it just takes all the personalization out of it and gives you something to communicate about and share and be on the same page about.
I like that shared goal. Like kind of going back
That's very
to, we do it
Yeah.
with our personal whys. Everyone's like, go back to the why, go back to the goal, whatever
Right.
decision you make, go back to the main thing. And I don't know that we, I don't know that I've ever done that with like Grant to say,
Right.
what's the main, like, what is the goal? What is the main thing? The main thing
Hmm.
is, this. Okay, these things don't even matter. That isn't like,
That's right.
in the grand scheme of things, that has nothing to do with what our goal is. It's just distraction.
Yep.
Um, so I like that too. The goal.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down too.
I, yeah. I love that. That's well said. I'm not going to add anything to that because I love that. I'm going to take that away myself. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, tell us where we can get your book, when we can get your book, and it goes into, this was just like literally one thing that I wanted to pick out of it, which was compromise,
Hmm.
but that's just like one piece of
Yes.
all of the things.
Yep.
I wish we could get. I
Yes.
was like, how can I get him on here for 12 weeks to go over all the chapters? But we can just read your book. So tell us where to find that.
So actually, the compromise chapter is taken from a pre-order bonus ebook that I'm writing,
Oh, nice.
sort of a journal that I'm keeping as True Companions has gone through this publication and rollout process. So if folks are listening to this before February 9th, they can get that pre-order bonus. You can go to truecompanionsbook.com, truecompanionsbook.com, and you can order the book there. There's a way to order it from any vendor you want to. And then that's also the place before February 9th. You can enter your invoice number and
Hmm.
you can get signed up to get that free pre-order bonus. After February 9th, you can go there to order, but you can really go anywhere. It's going to be available hardback, digital, audio, anywhere really the books are sold. So you can pick it up anywhere.
Awesome. Well, great. I can Amazon that real quick.
You
Um,
you got it.
you got it. Awesome, Kelly. Thanks so much for being on and sharing just all your wisdom with us. And I can't wait to put some of these to work this week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kelly.